Tony, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
It's my privilege, and I appreciate that you're even interested.
Thank you, sir. So let's start at the beginning. You were a good student growing up, graduated Stanford. Why law school?
Well, it was a fallback position. I was a philosophy major at Stanford, and frankly, I had kind of romantic notions of expatriating and becoming kind of a poet and a writer, and not really succeeding, but, like a flower blossoming on the desert, kind of unseen and unappreciated. So I went to Morocco, and a lot of expatriates were there, and it was an era, remember, I'm old, so this was like in the 50s, and, there were lots of Americans and French and English, Canadians, lots of people from different countries, and a very sophisticated literary scene there. And somehow, and I was a jock, so I remember at Stanford I played baseball, football, and I boxed, and I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, this was an era that preceded marijuana, so I was kind of like an athlete and very pure in a way, but I fell in. All of these writers, these expatriated, people in Morocco at that time, I'm talking mainly Tangier, they were using junk, they were shooting up, heroin, they were smoking the opiates, and I didn't like that. It offended my sense of health. So it was a fallback. So I said, what the hell, I'll go to law school, and I applied from Morocco. And I used to get good grades, and so they accepted me without... Normally, you're tested and you have to go through a whole ritual before you're accepted. And both UC Berkeley is a very good law school and their standards are high, but I was accepted, and then I came back, and took the necessary tests. And then the first year, I was like number 11 out of about 320, so I did quite good. And then the second year I went, I took off and went to India for a year. Then I came back and I finished, 2 more years. Then after I graduated, I went to South America for a year. So I've always intermixed, what would I call it, practice of law, preparation for the practice of law with travel. So it was a fallback position from the kind of, I think, probably over-romanticized the belief that I could write and create poetry in Morocco.
And upon graduation, you became a prosecutor. And I've seen you say that your time in that role is a time you regret. You tried 35 cases in 11 months. Why is that?
No, I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I did not want to be an office lawyer. I wanted to try cases. I wanted, even at that earliest stage, to keep people out of what I call steel boxes, the jails and the incarceration and all of whatever you want to call it, the pain and suffering that goes along with it. So I had a strong empathy in that direction. So I want to be a trial lawyer, and I want a trial experience. So I went to all the public defenders in the Bay Area, and they go, no, you got to be on the counter for 1 year, man. You won't get into court until at least a year. Back then, that was true, not now. And I said no, and so I then went around to DA's offices, and Alameda says, you come here, you'll be in court next day, So I said, that's what I want. So I went there. I was there 11 months. I had 34 jury trials, so I had more trials than any other of my peer group graduating. So in a sense, I was well ahead. So I took off. I went into the Haight-Ashbury. I opened my own office. I started representing, all people that were the protesters at SF State, the protesters that were UC Berkeley. I represented, most of all the early groups at SLA and New World Liberation Front. I represented the various gangs, the Black Panthers, the White Panthers, the Hells Angels, et cetera, et cetera. So I started a very active career out of the Haight-Ashbury, and it was predicated on political reform and, fighting government. I started at the earliest stage to fight government. I used to sleep in the Black Panthers headquarters at night because they were expected to be raided, and they had sandbags. So in those days you could have rifles, so they had rifles. They were ready, to have a shootout, and they wanted a so-called white lawyer to be there to try to, mediate, to be maybe a observer, or maybe to be the first one shot. Who the heck knows? So I slept both in the Panther House in San Francisco and in Oakland, and I met Huey Newton, the Black Panther leader, a beautiful man, a very gifted intellect, a master of the Old Testimony, of the Old Testament. He was like a, Hebrew scholar in a way. And then when he left and then he came back, remember, from China and Cuba, I represented him in a murder case and got him acquitted. So it kind of launched me into national prominence. That case, it was, it was political. It was the media was there in abundance. It was attended by sellout crowds. That is, the courts were packed, the halls were packed, the whole building was surrounded. It was, for me, a fabulous time. The 60s for me was fabulous, representing, the political entities then that in the heart of which was anti-establishment, demonstrating against establishment, a lot of times doing what they call actions against the establishment, for which there was, how would I call it, criminal charges. So 60s for me were, I always call the golden age of practice, because judges were interested in throwing cases out if there was constitutional violations. Juries really believed in reasonable doubt. Jesus, I went through, I was doing back-to-back jury trials just like a public defender, and I would seldom lose in those days. I used to say, I can hang anything, and, this is all predicated on me doing everything pro bono. So in the earlier stages, I was doing all of it pro bono. I would take a case here and there to pay the rent, to pay whatever you want to call it, gasoline in the car. But I later took what I call a vow of poverty, that I never wanted to capitalize off of law. I don't want profit. I'm kind of a Marxist in that respect. And, I took what I needed to support my office. If I took a fee, I would use sometimes the money for other free cases where, there were costs and maybe witness investigations, et cetera, But I still have lived behind the so-called vow of poverty. San Francisco rents are the highest in the country. My building starts at $2,500 a unit. I still pay $400. So I live very frugally. I don't have any lavish expenses in my life. I am 99.9% lawyer, and it's. Sometimes for other types it's a hard road to hoe because it's a workaholic's life. But from my perspective, not guilty in a criminal case is kind of the highest calling of the profession, and that's what I've sought after all these years.
That's right, and you mentioned Huey Newton and some of the other cases you've taken on. Why do you think it's so critical to represent those whom the general public deems so undesirable? That's something you've done your whole career. Why is that so important to you? It's a cornerstone of your career.
Well, the measure of, the judicial integrity, the judicial process, the constitutional government, the measure of it is how you treat the rejects, how you treat the impoverished, how you treat the insane, how you treat those who have aberrated behavior, those who have aberrated ideology. The system isn't measured by, how the criminal justice system treats a rich white man. That, has always been, whatever you want to call it, in my opinion, kind of the fallacy within the alleged system that we have, that there's one kind of case for the rich and there's another for the poor. So I did gravitate toward the anti-establishment. Most of the time they harbored, when they were intellectual, anti-establishment philosophy. I'm anti-establishment. Understand, I've been to prison, 2 occasions. On 3 different occasions, I've been convicted of willful failure to file and to pay. Not fraud. Fraud is felony. I don't file and I don't pay and I go to jail. I have no assets, so they can't, seize anything for back taxes. So every decade I go to jail. The last time I went, it was a 10-month sentence. I go to a camp. I work in the camp. I wrote 4 books while I was there. I helped everyone with their writs and with their appeals. And my God, since I wasn't disbarred, because why I went was for a cause. California bar was very good to me. They understood it was a cause that I don't pay my taxes, and they did not take my license, and therefore in jail, in prison, I'm allowed to help people, and I started doing civil things, like helping them in domestic relations or contracts or, credit issues and bankruptcy issues. It was fabulous, for me it was fabulous. It would be like a dentist. I'd sit out there and one after the next would come, and I'd hear their tale, and most of the time it was sad, man. They're in there, they don't think they're guilty, they're in there, they didn't get a good deal, they're in there because they didn't trust their lawyer, they're in there because of stitches. I would hear, story after story, and it for me, see, practice the law is a calling. It's almost like a religious calling. It's not something like, for most lawyers, a means toward an end. They are materialistic. Oh, they like big boats or, airplane trips to Europe. I don't know, houses, and I don't even understand it all because I'm completely non-materialistic. I like color. I've always enjoyed, chromatic kind of interpretation of things, and I guess it's in my blood in the sense that my brothers and all my kids, I have 5 kids, are all doing something artistic. None of them went into, I'll call it that side of the brain, that becomes what I call semantic analytic, which is the lawyer's side of the brain. They all went into aesthetic, into art, into culture, and I guess my little residue of that is that, I'm non-materialistic, and I enjoy aesthetics. I enjoy, art. I enjoy theater. I enjoy going to museums. I enjoy classical music. So it's interesting. I'm a mixed bag. I guess we're all mixed bags.
And you mentioned your representation of members of the Black Panthers, the White Panthers, Hells Angels, SLA. How tough is it in those cases to overcome the initial, let's be honest, presumption of guilt that's imposed upon these folks by prosecutors, the jury, society in general?
I've had very good result in jury trials. I'm considered one of the best. Now I'm old, obviously not as acute as I used to be when I was much younger. So it didn't, somehow, you seize upon some high ground. In every case, there's high grounds. Sometimes whatever it is that it's an informant case or it's a self-defense case. Sometimes the gang allegation is false. Sometimes, the persons have a form of dementia. The theme of the jury trial is to seize the high moral issue, abstract it, and then present it. And let that overshadow, let's call it, the direct evidence, let's say, of criminal activity. You turn it into a passion play, into a moral, like a vote for the prosecution is a vote, I would say nowadays, for Trump, and out here we're completely anti-Trump, so it resonates with the jury. So I always say you got to kind of redraw the arena in which the litigation occurs. If you stay within the frame of the prosecution, you lose. You're on the train, to prison. So you have to remove it and, say, this case is about a perjurious informant. It's not about my client. He was induced, he was entrapped, that kind of stuff. And I'm known to be kind of loud, passionate, bellicose when required, defiant. I pride myself that in my youth I was held in contempt more times than any lawyer probably around, maybe any lawyer. I went to jail frequently because I wouldn't bow down. I wouldn't supplicate myself like to the dictatorial authority of some of the judges. I wouldn't, pretend I'm making a closing argument, the DA objects, and the judge says, Mr. Serra, you're going far astray. And I'll say, this is America. I'm a lawyer. I'm speaking on behalf of my client. You can't silence me. So I was known for going in their face. And as a consequence, oh my God, I did jail in Marin. I did jail in 2 different jails in San Francisco. I did jail in San Mateo County. I did jail in San Jose, Santa Clara County. And then, of course, I've in terms of filing taxes, I've been a tax resistor my entire career, so I've never paid taxes. And, I've been prosecuted 3 times on that, given probation once, and 2 times going into federal prison camps. So I'm very active still. Like this morning, there's a case out here that's fairly prominent, only because Trump used it kind of as a poster image for his election. So it's an illegal immigrant who picks up a bag, it has a gun, it goes off, it shoots, sadly, a woman. It's on the pier, and he got convicted not of the homicide in the state court. I didn't have it, the public defender had it, but only of ex-felon with a gun. And then it went federal, and so it's a political kind of case. And as you might know, there's a new Supreme Court case that has given cert as to double jeopardy issues with separate sovereign, doctrine. They may abandon separate sovereign doctrine. It's been with us 150 years, but the Supreme Court just took a case and they wouldn't have taken it unless some of the justices thought that, it's time to kind of rid ourselves of the federalism that is creeping over the court system, especially under the present administration. So that was a meaningful case. The cameras were all there. You make press statements afterwards, and so that was just this morning. And whatever, I'm 84, almost 85, but I'm up at 5 and I work, 10, 12 hours a day. I work on weekends. My kids are all grown up and, kind of scattered throughout the United States. So I give myself entirely to my practice.
And one of the best you are. And you're certainly a lawyer who we'd refer to as a high-profile lawyer, but you've never been known as a celebrity lawyer or a white-collar lawyer. Is that by design, or is your heart just elsewhere?
Well, both of those things. I won't represent establishment. So I'm not representing like political people, straight political people. I'm not representing police. I'm not representing stockbrokers or bankers or Wall Street types. I don't do business types of crime, white-collar crime. I'm known. I'm in the gutter, man. I'm in the streets. I fight for the underdog, the discriminated, person, the person without assets, or the person, has been persecuted for a lifetime. So I have a whole different orientation. See, a lot of criminal defense lawyers, oh boy, they love it when they get a stockbroker. They can charge him $100,000 as a fee. The guy's got money, his career's on the line. I'm not in the money, and I'm not into representing people whose, political philosophy or capitalistic kind of over the dominance, creates their behavior. Those people aren't my people. So you got to know, what your milieu is. You got to gain strength by representing that milieu. And as you open this interview up, you did indicate I represent the underdog. I'm not going to be representing anyone with any establishment pedigree.
In your style in the courtroom, you could tell that passion is so genuine. Where does that come from? Is it your upbringing, some experience in your life, your education, perhaps?
Well, they call me the True Believer. Remember, there was a movie with James Woods called True Believer. It purportedly was about one of my cases, a death penalty case that I won. But, it was only 10% accurate. It was a big disappointment for me, although I think it did well. True Believer that made money, it was a major release. The concept of true believer, someone who believes, someone, who actualizes his idealism, someone who practices without ulterior materialistic motives, that comes from unknown variables. Is it your DNA? Was it your social, upbringing? Was it, probably, where it came from me is that I was, a philosophy major with an English minor, and I used to read, man. I used to read and read and read. Be nothing for me to read, like I'm reading a book, it's 1,400 pages, and I would read every night or whatever, every spare time I would read, and I think it's the reading that enculturated me, that impregnated me with the notion that life is more than making a buck, and that no one's free until everyone's free. And if there's a segment of a culture that isn't free and is dominated and, either coercively or corruptly, that's, the place that a lawyer is needed. So I've always said this. All my life, I represent the antithesis. The antithesis is something, it's the opposition. It's the minority. It's the anti-establishment. And the thesis is the main, theme, political and moral of the establishment. If we talk in Marxism, thesis begets the antithesis of the thesis merge, that's called a synthesis, and the synthesis becomes the new establishment, moral precept. It becomes, the theme again, and it's a way that things evolve. So my role is to represent wherever it is the dissident view, the objection. I go into law schools, talk, to young lawyers, and I said, you're going to learn one word, man, and you're going to use it all your life. And it's got 25 different meanings, and you got to give it content by intonation and by, how you say it, and that word's objection. I object, Your Honor. I object, Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor. Like in that one word, we are defiant. In that one word, we are oppositional. In that one word, we are activistic. And, we've got to sing it out loud. We have to, cherish it. We have to nurture it. Because the way things are going, especially in the present administration, they're going to eliminate fucking jury trials. They're going to at least eliminate that the jury has to be unanimous. Already there's a movement that 11, is enough. And we're threatened in that respect. And we're threatened by judges who are unfair. A lot of judges, you think, oh, they're the goalie in this, and they're the referee. And then you find out, no, they're the goalie. You get around the DA, you get around the evidence, you get around the jury instructions. You're ready for a victory, and then you see who blocks you. It's the judge. So, we need a better system than we have, because presently, Trump has appointed more judges, in the time he's in than any other previous one. He's back to courts. He's back to courts with mostly white men who are conservative. He's putting them on the Supreme Court. We're going to live with that heritage for at least another 50 years. And it changes really the face of, our culture, and certainly changes the priorities in the criminal jurisprudence segment.
And actually, you touched on something that I wanted to talk about for just a second. What could law schools do to modify their course of study to stop pumping out...
No, they've started doing it. You got two kinds of law schools. You got the best law schools, and they, for the most part, teach academics. And, I've had some great professors, and I can still remember on occasion some of their words. Then you've got a great number of lesser law schools, some accredited and some not. And they do what you're talking about. They make sure that their students, intern with law offices, intern with public defender or DA. They, are taught like what office you go to file a motion or who you serve the motion on, all of the little practicalities that most law schools, in the past, and all the good law schools, they really don't get down to that detail, and now the small law schools do. So when they graduate from law school, they've had jury experience, they've had, they've helped write motions, they're ready to fly. Instead of when you graduate from a major law school, it takes a year or so to get into the practicalities, into the mechanics of practice, and that is being taught now, I think, steadfastly and dutifully in law schools, except not as much. I'm talking like Yale and Harvard and, Bolt Hall and Stanford and USC and, those law schools, and rightfully, they produce the judges and they produce, the law instructors and teachers, so that they emphasize more academics, case law and Supreme Court constitutional issues. than the run-of-the-mill, let's call it, accredited law school of lesser repute.
Understood. Tony, it's been so great of you to join us. You're such a fascinating guy. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this once again.
No, it's my privilege, and thank you.